July 15, 2006, the Chassahowitzka River sat calm under the moonlight. At just before midnight, four young men, Jason Boyette, Tyler, Mark, and Shane, pulled up to the water's edge. They weren't professionals. No gear, no suits, just snorkels, fins, and a cheap flashlight. They'd heard rumors, underwater caves beneath the surface. Hidden, dangerous, unexplored. That only added to the thrill. The first few dives were quick. They'd drop through a narrow crevice, explore for a few seconds, then shoot back up laughing. Then came Jason's turn. He took the flashlight, smiled, and slipped beneath the surface. They waited. 1 minute, 2. The light below danced faintly but didn't rise. At first, they joked. "He's showing off," Mark said. "Probably went deeper." Then the light flickered. Once, twice, and jerked wildly. Something was wrong. Tyler dove in immediately. Inside, the cave was tight, cold. The deeper he went, the less light reached him. The water pressed in. Then he saw it. The flashlight beam thrashing. And Jason. He was stuck, twisted in the limestone. His arms flailed, his chest heaved, eyes wide in panic. He couldn't move forward or back. The passage was too tight. Tyler pushed toward him but hit solid rock. There was no room, no angle, no time. His lungs screamed. He had to surface or risk getting trapped himself. Breaking the surface, Tyler gasped, "He's stuck. He can't move." All three dove again and again, desperate attempts to free him. But the cave was unforgiving, narrow, jagged, and silent. Then the light below went out. They called for help. Rescue divers arrived hours later, but it was too dangerous to dive at night. They waited for daylight. At dawn, fully equipped divers entered with grim determination. At 9 a.m., they reached Jason. He hadn't made it. His body was still pinned in place, the cave refusing to let go. What began as a thrill-seeking night dive ended in tragedy. The boys would never be the same. Jason was just 22. Caves don't care how young you are, how fearless, or how well you swim. One mistake underground, and there's no second chance. August 19, 1997, Andros Island, Bahamas. At the edge of the sea just before nightfall, two divers, Rob Parker, 35, and Dan Malone, 32, prepared for a dive few had ever attempted. They weren't part of a rescue. This wasn't a test. It was personal. One last push into the depths of Four Sharks Blue Hole, a place few dared enter, and no one had fully explored. The Bahamas hold the highest concentration of blue holes on Earth. And Four Sharks isn't just another sinkhole, it's an ocean blue hole, tidal, unpredictable, and carved along a fault line inside the Bahamas Barrier Reef. Its surface is calm, but beneath that is a vast and dangerous world. The first chamber, Kick Cavern, stretches 230 feet long and 65 feet wide, sloping to 196 feet deep. But at the far end lies the real hazard, a tight, twisting side passage known only to a few. Dangerous, unmapped, off-limits during official dives. Rob Parker wasn't new to danger. He was a veteran British cave diver with over 1,000 dives. Mentored by legends like Martin Farr, he had worked alongside explorers like Bill Stone. His experience was real. But in recent years, his focus had shifted. More filming, less exploration. Still, when fellow diver Rob Palmer died in August 1997, Parker was chosen to take his place in a German documentary exploring the Bahamian cave systems. That's how he ended up here. 10 days of preparation, dives up to 350 feet, 2 days of decompression and nitrogen flushing. And now, a final dive. This one undocumented. No cameras, no crew, just Rob and Dan. The plan was simple. Drop to 220 feet using compressed air, then switch tanks and go deeper into the forbidden passage. Only Rob and Dan would attempt the restriction. Support divers would wait in the main chamber, but earlier that day they'd misjudged the tide, turned back. The currents were too strong. Ocean blue holes like Four Sharks breathe with the sea. Water rushes in and out of the entrance like a lung. The only safe window? Slack tide, a brief pause when the surge stops. At 8 p.m., slack tide arrived. They descended again. Side-mounted tanks gave them room to maneuver. They slipped into the narrow restriction, 2 feet wide, jagged, unforgiving. Behind them, they laid a guideline, the only way back. 20 minutes in, they reached it. The hidden cavern. It was massive, dark, quiet, untouched. Floating inside the vast chamber, they were alone. But time was short. The tide would soon shift. If it did, the surge could trap them inside. They turned back. That's when Dan's backup regulator failed. He switched back to compressed air. Not ideal at depth, but stable. Then came the narcosis, sudden, crippling. His vision blurred. His limbs grew heavy. He felt drunk, like downing a dozen beers at once. But he held it together. Focused, waited it out. Then, he noticed Rob signaling something. The signals were strange, confused. Then Rob looked away and kept swimming. Dan felt a chill but followed. Inside that tight crack, there was no room for questions, just survival. Dan led, Rob followed, then silence. No bubbles, no movement. Dan turned. Rob was sinking, fast, no control, no resistance. A silent drop through the black. Dan kicked hard, diving after him. 30, 40 feet down, he caught Rob's ankle and stopped the fall. Then he pulled, swimming against the cold and the weight. Then, Dan lost both his fins. Now every stroke was a battle. Rob wasn't kicking, just breathing, barely. Dan pushed forward, dragging him toward the restriction. Then, Rob stirred. A few kicks, steady. Like nothing had happened. Dan was stunned. But they had no time. Dan's air was almost gone. They needed to reach the stage tanks placed just outside the passage. Decompression mixes for the final ascent. Inside the restriction, the current had returned. It surged, pressing them backward. Dan dropped beneath the guideline. Rob stayed above. The passage narrowed again. Dan turned sideways, angled his tanks, and shoved forward. The walls scraped his shoulders. His chest was tight. His lungs burned. Then, he was out. He lunged for a stage tank, opened the valve, and took a breath. Cold, dry, and real. He was alive. But Rob wasn't there. Dan waited. Nothing. He waved his light into the darkness. Still nothing. Then, he signaled the support diver, Tom, waiting in the main chamber. The signal was clear. Rob was missing. Dan was 6'4", 210 pounds. He knew he couldn't go back through that restriction. Not safely, not without gear. The tank he was breathing from was not rated for that depth. The wrong gas mix below 120 feet would be toxic. Tom couldn't go either. He lacked the experience and he was nearly out of air. There was no choice. Dan began his 3-hour decompression ascent, alone. His mind raced. Was Rob truly conscious when he kicked earlier? Or was it just reflex? He surfaced dazed, physically drained, emotionally fractured. On board, the film crew was waiting. Among them was Stevie, widow of the late Rob Palmer. When she learned what had happened, she was furious. She believed she could have reached Rob in time. Dan disagreed. Going back in would have meant 2 deaths. The next day, Dan dove again, this time with expert cave diver Brian Kakuk and Stevie. They couldn't recover the body, not yet. It took 2 more days and perfect tidal timing. When they returned, they found Rob's body at 149 feet. To move him, they had to strip away every piece of gear. Tanks, straps, harnesses, just to fit his body through the narrow crack. Piece by piece, they brought him out. No autopsy was ever performed. U.S. Coast Guard investigator Mike Papovich later concluded the likely cause: nitrogen narcosis, followed by disorientation and drowning. A misstep during the gas switch or simple timing may have sealed his fate. Rob Parker was one of the most experienced blue hole divers of his time. But 4 sharks didn't care.